Vitamins and minerals are nutrients that are important to help our body function properly. Too much or too little of these vitamins can actually cause mild and serious conditions, whether it be dry skin or brittle bones. And actually, it's worth noting that particularly over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of changes in terms of people's daily diets. And actually, that's causing us to get different proportions of vitamins and minerals compared to what we have naturally and generally been used to over very, very long periods. So it's important that we make sure we get the right kinds of vitamins in the right balance and the right amounts. And that's why we provide lots of information in our vitamin and mineral glossary to help people kind of drill down and focus on what they need or what they might be missing. So the most remarkable one actually is when it comes to fish oils. It was generally recommended that you got twice as much omega-3 as you did 6 and 9. Omega-3 tends to come from fish sources, whereas 6 and 9 comes from sort of plant-based sources. But because of the change in people's diets, actually most people are getting nearly 3 times as much omega-6 and 9 as they are omega-3 these days. So it's these subtle changes which are kind of leading to all sorts of things actually, because fish oils can affect anyone, whether it be mothers potentially going through postnatal depression, which is way more common if you're not getting enough omega-3, because your baby is basically, to put it in the worst way possible, leaching all your DHA out of you, whether it be when it's in your tummy or when it's breastfeeding. So postnatal is much more likely if you're not getting enough omega-3, which is way more common now. But also, things like joint pain. Again, it's much more likely when you're not getting enough of the omega-3 in your diet. So yeah, it is unusual. You can get the vast majority of vitamins and minerals from a balanced diet, and also by living a healthy lifestyle. So for example, by that I mean spending time outdoors. But the simple truth is that in some cases it's simply not possible. In other cases, dietary restrictions might make it extremely hard. For example, vegetarians will struggle to get a healthy amount of essential fatty acids. So it is possible, but really, with modern life, it's really essential that people do supplement on a day-to-day basis. There is a remarkable amount of evidence, actually. There's a great body of research showing, particularly, the trouble that can be caused from vitamin and mineral imbalances. So, it often happens during certain more strenuous periods of life. Most obvious natural example of that is something like pregnancy, where essentially, your baby requires so much, and it can really leave you quite drained and quite imbalanced. And in fact, in many cases, doctors, the NHS will actively recommend that you do take supplements to try and rectify those imbalances. In truth, there's a huge variety of conditions. So there's a great body of evidence that shows that certain imbalances can lead to certain problems. So, a great example of that, which is perhaps lesser known but increasingly common in the Western world, is fungal nail infections. And fungal infections are far more likely to occur when your body is short on zinc. And zinc is actually part of the natural immunity building system in the body. So actually at the same time, you're much more likely to find that you come down with things like flu and other things when your immune system is weaker, which might occur because, for example, of a lack of zinc or possibly also vitamin C. The other, probably most famous deficiency in general is vitamin D deficiency. And it's remarkable because in a country like England, it's never sunny, and in fact it often rains, and as a result we're all vitamin D deficient because we don't spend enough time exposed in the sun. But what's really remarkable is when you look at sunny countries, for example the Middle East, places like Dubai, Saudi Arabia, etc., actually rates of vitamin D deficiency are even higher there because it's so sunny that everybody spends their time in air-conditioned buildings and going, rather than walking in the streets, they take cars everywhere. So pretty much wherever you live, whatever your environment, if you're spending too long indoors, if you're spending time, and actually, it's perfectly sensible to do so, but if you wear suntan lotion, which obviously helps prevent aging and protect your body from cancer, the trouble is that you are actually inhibiting your ability to absorb vitamin D. So in so many cases, people complain of things like fatigue, incredibly common, and in so many cases, it's because of vitamin D deficiency. I think so. Yes, absolutely. I think there are, I think lots of people essentially wait till something is going wrong to then start investigating, and that inevitably starts with a visit to the GP and a blood test. But actually, that is, quite a laborious process, and in many cases, it's better to effectively get ahead of the curve, and it's in many cases it's incredibly predictable. So we're coming into, obviously right now we're coming into the summer, but when we approach winter, it's far more common that you will be vitamin D deficient and that your immune system might need extra protection. That comes because actually when your body is colder, your immune system is naturally weakened, and that's why you're more likely to get sick in the winter rather than in the summer. So these are little things that we can effectively prepare for in our day-to-day life to help us all feel better. Yes, absolutely. So what we find is that through the aging process, our bodies have different requirements. And a great example of that is as we get older, our body starts to produce less of a chemical called hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid sits in the skin and essentially helps our body to hold water, or helps our skin to hold water. And that's why, as we age, we have less hyaluronic acid in the skin, and the result is that our skin starts to sag. It looks less kind of firm and supple, and that's why older people are much more likely to complain of dry skin because of their hyaluronic acid deficiency. But actually, we can look at the same thing for children, and we can say that, well, actually, children up to pretty much the age of 16 are going through an incredible amount of brain development. And the odds are, in 90% of cases, that you are simply not supporting the child well enough to allow for that brain development through fish oils. So these are two small but incredibly common examples of how we can really help ourselves at different ages to supplement in certain ways. It's actually a tricky question to answer, and unfortunately, the vague truth is that it does depend. There are certain supplements out there which a lot of people with, for example, arthritis and other kinds of joint pain take, and actually they promise results within 7 days. However, in many cases, for example, with a vitamin D deficiency, which is again a very, very common thing that people supplement for, you can be talking about 4 to 6 weeks before you start to see a real improvement or a real change. So it is something that requires a little bit of commitment at time, and to some extent you kind of have to commit to the process to really see the benefits. In some cases, it can come down to feeling. The positive thing is that actually, again, the feedback we get on the supplements that we often sell is incredibly positive. The reason that people start using supplements and then don't stop is because they feel a difference. They notice there is a significant impact, and actually what's really funny is we have quite a lot of customers who will take something and then, for example, will go away on a 3-4 week trip and forget it, so on and so forth, and the moment they get back, they're on the phone to us saying, oh, I never thought it made a difference until I stopped taking it. So it's remarkable actually how these things really do work, and in many cases actually you can measure. For example, if you were vitamin D deficient, you can measure the impact via a blood test, so you can see that actually you've moved up the scale and you are no longer deficient. So in some cases it is measurable, in other cases it is some feeling. Yes, there are undoubtedly risks, as with just about anything in life. Too much can actually end up being a bad thing. So we've talked a great deal about vitamin D deficiency today, and actually the trouble is that vitamin D is something which is water soluble, and the result is that there is a chance that if you take too much for too long, and in truth it is an incredibly high dose required for quite a sustained period, it can be risky. So it is important to speak to a nutritionist, or to gain at least some understanding before you kind of start down the road. I wouldn't necessarily recommend self-diagnosis. For most people, it's important to seek credible sources to get the information that you need. The other thing worth adding, vitamins and minerals, whilst they are essential for the functioning of the body, and they are things that we have obtained naturally through foods for thousands of years, they're also not medicine. So whilst vitamins and minerals can absolutely be used to kind of help in a preventative way, and also to help kind of improve your daily feeling, I wouldn't at any point say to you that product X can cure disease Y, and it's important to remember that. But over the coming weeks, we'll be going into these and other conditions in more depth to answer your specific needs and the variety of factors that should be considered when taking vitamins and minerals, whether it's by age or by gender or by a variety of other factors. If you do have any queries, please do message us and we'll add it to our events page. Lovely.